25th of August 2018, Sverdlovsk region, Russia. Two friends, Ksenia and Natalia, decided to go hiking near the beautiful mountain Uktus. They ordered pizza and were hiking and having fun while taking pictures and posting them. In the evening, they stopped answering calls. On the next morning, just random passers-by made a horrific discovery. Body of Ksenia and the deadly wounded Natalia, both shot multiple times. The only clue is a footage of bad quality where an unknown man walks after the victims. In this video, I will tell you the story of the Mountain Uktus murders. Hi friends, you're watching the Dronis channel. In this video, I want to tell you about Uktus mountain murders. This case is particularly interesting because of the way how it was solved by police. It also can show you that unsolved childhood trauma can lead to horrific consequences many years later. As always, if you will enjoy this video, please leave a like at the end, it helps a lot, and let's begin. So everything started when two friends, 28-year-old Natalia Kuznetsova and 29-year-old Ksenia Saltanova from the city Yekaterinburg, decided to go to have a picnic, and they wanted to do it near the mountain called Uktus. Uktus Mountains is the mountain range near city Yekaterinburg, and it is the place where locals love to hike and have picnics. There are also a few ski resorts and hotels there. So it is a well-known place for everyone to spend their weekends. Natalia and Ksenia knew each other for many years and were best friends. Both found good jobs and were always supporting each other no matter what they did. And they spent a lot of time together. Not long before her 30th birthday, Ksenia found out that she will be promoted on her current job. She was so happy that she decided she needs to celebrate this promotion with her friend Natalia before she went on her vacation on her birthday. Ksenia and Natalia planned to hike to the mountain Uktus and have a picnic there, as they did many times before that. It was one of their favorite places near Yekaterinburg. So on the day of the picnic, Ksenia and Natalia left in the evening, and as soon as they met, they started posting photographs together. Everything seemed fine. You can see them on the photographs eating pizza and smiling. At some point, both of them stopped answering calls and messages, but their mothers thought that it is normal. They were adults and maybe they just went to some party. But in the morning, one of the locals, while he was on the morning jog, found Natalia and Ksenia. Ksenia was dead and Natalia was barely alive. She was sent to the hospital immediately. Both of them were shot multiple times. Natalia's mother, Tatiana, rushed to see her daughter in the hospital. Natalia was brought up there, covered with blood and unconscious. Despite her mother's prayers, she soon died without regaining consciousness. Crime scene experts concluded that both of the victims were shot using a pneumatic weapon that was modified to be more lethal. Someone who has basic knowledge can do this, and a simple non-lethal pneumatic gun can become a deadly weapon. The rumors have spread through the town. People were discussing the mysterious shooter wandering in the forests. The best detectives were involved in the investigation, and this became a high-priority case. People were worried, as many of them enjoyed hikes near the Uktus Mountains, and they were even letting their kids walk alone there. The first tip was discovered when detectives started checking surveillance cameras that were installed not far from the crime scene. Because it's a relatively remote place, there are not many of them. But on one of the cameras, judging by location and the approximate time of the murders, they saw a man that was most likely the murderer who killed Natalia and Ksenia. Because of the video quality, it was impossible to establish who that person was. Investigators assumed that the murderer was a skillful shooter and was able to easily navigate in the forested area. Soon, it became clear by the footprints on the ground that after shooting Ksenia and Natalia, the assailant carried them deeper in the forest. Probably he hoped that it would be less likely that passers-by would find his victims. Other than that, detectives didn't have much evidence on the crime scene. While trying to understand the motive, investigators rejected the possibility of a robbery. Both Ksenia's and Natalia's belongings were untouched. It was also unlikely that the motive was sexual because their bodies weren't assaulted by the attacker. So at this point, investigators couldn't establish what was the actual reason for the murder. In the meantime, all of the ex-convicts who were jailed for gun-related crimes were checked. Then police officers checked all of the people who were recently released from psychiatric facilities in Yekaterinburg. But no matter what they did, they didn't find any possible suspects. It was obvious that one of the possible motives for the murder was an act of revenge for something. Because of how Natalia and Ksenia were killed, it seemed like it might have been planned beforehand, and if so, vengeance was the most likely motive. But both of the victims didn't have any enemies and were kind to everyone. Their mothers couldn't name someone who could have wished them harm. Then one of the investigators, while studying the photographs made by Natalia and Ksenia not long before the murders, noticed a pizza box they were holding. But on the photographs posted a little bit earlier, they didn't have a pizza box with them. As it turned out, Natalia and Ksenia ordered pizza and just went down the slope to meet the delivery man down there. And then they just went back up the mountain. It was pretty easy to find out who was that delivery man. It was a student who was working part-time. His name was Oleg Balenov. There was nothing unusual about him except one thing. On the next day after the murder, he just disappeared. And police detectives thought that it was possible that if the pizza delivery man wasn't the murderer, he probably might have become a victim too, if he became a witness of the attack on Ksenia and Natalia. Detectives visited Oleg's apartment. The door was opened by his friend. They were renting this apartment together. The friend didn't know where Oleg was. He thought that he just left to live in another apartment. Officers also found Oleg's diploma. It was given to him for participating in biathlon tournament. It made them more suspicious. If he was a professional biathlete, he must have been very good at shooting. His apartment now was under surveillance. And that same night, Oleg returned home. When he saw that police officers are gonna approach him, he ran away. But because his delivery man's uniform was making him noticeable, he was soon caught in the nearby neighborhood. When taken to the interrogation room, Oleg right away started talking, but not about the murders. As it turned out, he recently stole an electric scooter because it was hard for him to work on a bicycle. He ran away from police officers because he was afraid that he will be jailed for stealing. Oleg recognized Natalia and Ksenia from the photographs. He delivered them pizza on the day of the murder, but he even had an alibi. Shortly after delivering pizza, he had gotten into a minor car accident while being on his scooter. The driver of the car that had gotten into an accident with Oleg was found, and he proved his alibi. Because they were unable to understand the motive of the murder, detectives thought that it was possible that somebody who studied with Ksenia and Natalia in university or maybe even in school might have wanted to kill them. Many years have passed, but sometimes people hold grudges for years. They checked the victims' classmates. Hundreds of people were questioned by police officers, but again, nobody interesting for the investigation was found. Desperate mothers of the victims were suspecting everyone now. They even suspected a runner who found Natalia and Ksenia, because when he found them, he thought that it's a good idea to post a photograph of Ksenia and Natalia on the ground with a comment that was mocking them. But he had an alibi too. Then, detectives found out that not long before the murder, Ksenia started dating a guy. Her mother told the investigator that she and her new boyfriend separated a few times, but then they started dating again. The boyfriend's name was Pavel, and the police started investigating their private messages. A few times Pavel was messaging Ksenia telling her that he cannot meet tomorrow because, as he said, he had a battle. It turned out that he spent his free time playing so-called hardball, which is a military game that involves pneumatic weapons. Could he just have killed his girlfriend after another breakup? Two detectives went to the next meeting where Pavel went to play hardball. They weren't greeted by the participants very happily. Pavel was talking to detectives like a tough guy, probably showing off in front of his friends. When he was shown the photograph, he didn't deny that he knew the victims and said that he heard about the murder. On the day of the murder, Pavel was playing hardball with his friends, and they were able to prove his alibi. So again, police had no possible suspects. The murder case of Ksenia and Natalia in the police department already consisted of 100 tomes with documents, but still no real suspects. 2,000 people were questioned during the investigation. Also, on the clothes of Ksenia and Natalia that was extracted from the crime scene, investigators found DNA of 4 people. It didn't mean that any of them was the murderer. It could have been someone who, for example, hugged one of them not long before the murders. DNA samples were taken from hundreds of men in Yekaterinburg and there were no matches. 15 months passed after the murder. Police officers even have set up a bounty for any information that will lead to arrest. Many months later, there was no progress in the Natalia and Ksenia's murder investigation. People were discussing theories about the mysterious murder and rumors were spread. Because the cameras around Uktus area were broadcasting live on the internet, one of the locals, who is a self-proclaimed detective, started claiming that when he was observing livestream from one of the cameras on the mountain, he saw a killer who returned on the crime scene. He posted a video where an unknown man walks on the slope of the mountain, and it seems like he's doing a workout or shadow boxing even. This man later posted another video where you can see a flash, which he claimed to be caused by a gunshot. But there wasn't really evidence that any of those videos are somehow related to murders that happened 6 months ago. Natalia and Ksenia's mothers were so desperate that they went to visit the head of the investigation committee of Russia in Moscow. They complained that the investigation is going very slowly and they were losing hope that the murder will be ever found. They were promised that the best investigators will work on this case in the shortest time possible. Not much time passed after this, and in December of 2019, the first breakthrough happened. While researching one of the illegal forums, detectives noticed a message where a man was trying to buy spare parts for a pneumatic rifle of caliber 6.35 that was used by the killer. They found out who was the man behind this message. As it turned out, it was one of the residents of Yekaterinburg, 35-year-old Alexei Alexandrov. Police acquired an arrest warrant and soon Alexei was arrested. A pneumatic rifle of the caliber 6.35, same as one that was used on the crime scene, was found in his apartment. Also, 3 more guns were found there. At first, when asked anything, Alexei was mostly answering, "It's hard to answer." Detectives decided to use a lie detector, and at some point, Alexandrov just broke under pressure and started talking. Alexei Alexandrov was, on the surface, a normal 35-year-old man with a wife and 3-year-old son, working in the local factory and having weapons and shooting as a hobby. But the reason for him to become a murderer started in his childhood. When Alexei was in kindergarten, he was afraid of everything and everyone, and he only enjoyed spending his time alone. Alexei was always bullied. Other kids took his toys, and Alexei was just helplessly crying. In school, bullying got much worse. He was consistently beaten up by everyone, mocked, and just considered weird. The scariest moment for him was when the teacher left class and he was staying alone with his classmates. And Alexei was never able to stand for himself. He was too afraid and just cried. The bullying continued even in college. Because he was defenseless as a coping mechanism, when he was just a kid, Alexei created his own revenge system. All of his negative emotions that came from grudges he stored in so-called central buffer of temporary storage. So it was an imaginary catalog, and when someone did something bad to him, he called it a damage or deadly damage and stored in his imaginary catalog. And by doing this as a child, Alexei was able to survive all the bullying that he suffered. But he didn't let those thoughts go when he grew up. And since he was a child, he calculated that to cover all of the damage that he received, he needed to kill 4 people. In that way, he thought that he would have been avenged. He later said that he was considering many options. He could have killed people who bullied him, or maybe other people he knew, or just random people. But he thought that if he will kill his bullies, it will be easier to find him. And he decided that he will just kill some random people, and this way he will avenge all the bullying that he suffered. Later, as an adult, he lived in an unhappy marriage with a wife who was allegedly cheating on him and had a child who he didn't really care about. Alexei even allegedly was openly keeping and using a sex doll in his closet because of how bad it was going in his marriage. Alexei always carried a camera with him and posted hundreds of photographs with his friends and his trips abroad. But still, his biggest hobby were guns, as he thought that by having them he would be able to protect himself. He also didn't forget about all of the so-called damage that he received during his life. At some point it became impossible for Alexei to tolerate everything that happened to him, and he decided that it is time to avenge himself. 1 month before the day of the murder, he started preparing. He himself assembled a pneumatic rifle, but it was so powerful that it could easily kill. Alexei was practicing his shooting skills more often than usual and preparing. On the day of the murder, Alexandrov grabbed his gun and went to the forest near Mount Uktus. He chose victims randomly. He knew that if he will be walking long enough, he will eventually find hikers or tourists. Ksenia and Natalia were just unlucky that Alexandrov stumbled upon them, eating pizza and enjoying their time. For some time, Alexandrov was indecisive and was afraid to act. Before actually going to kill anyone, he was shooting a random tree for an hour. It was not far from the actual crime scene. Then he sneakily approached Ksenia and Natalia and started shooting them while aiming in the head. Ksenia instinctively tried to cover her face with a pizza box, but the bullet just came through. When Alexandrov saw that Natalia, after being shot, is still breathing, he shot her again in the head, 2 times from a close distance. But she was still alive after it because those shots didn't pierce her skull. On the interrogation, Alexandrov told that after the killing, he was so afraid and astounded by what he did that he was shaking and regretted what he did immediately. Obviously, what he had done would never give him peace and help overcome child trauma. Because he didn't solve it with psychiatrists or in any other possible way, an adult man with a wife, child, good job, and many interesting hobbies at some point just decided to kill innocent people and ruin their relatives and his own life. On the trial, he was begging the victims' mothers for forgiveness and even wrote a poem telling about his remorse. Natalia and Ksenia's mothers didn't buy it. Until the end of the trial, they were cursing Alexandrov and wishing him death. His own father didn't believe that he is guilty, even when his son admitted what he did. Alexei Alexandrov was sentenced to life in prison for double murder. He is still serving his sentence in one of the prisons in Russia. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me what do you think about this case. Again, if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, it helps a lot, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.